everyone to another feature of the Prosperous Living Summit, launching our Prosperous Living magazine in our PWT Wellness Group. We have a most distinguished gentleman today with us. We have Youssef Skalli, founder of Skallability Coaching. He is a values-inspired empowerment coach. And we're going to be speaking about something that I have not heard anybody else speaking about, and is so fundamental for our mental health, wellness, happiness, empowerment, prosperity, you name it. Welcome, Youssef.
Thank you, Dr. Carolina. Happy to be here with you.
I am so excited to speak of this topic because we see a lot of hashtag emotional intelligence, right? Like it's there, like it's going to, arrive via courier, open it, and there you have it, emotional intelligence. But really, emotional intelligence is the outcome. And you speak of emotional adaptability.
Absolutely.
Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I really like how you structured it while introducing the topic, because emotional intelligence is a very important topic. And we see even a rise of the conversations around emotional intelligence, which is an excellent start. Yet, in my coaching, I meet, especially with men, I meet with many who are saying, like, I don't have emotional intelligence. I am not emotionally intelligent. Or some who go and take some courses or read tons of books and still yet, but I still don't know what is emotional intelligence. So I started working on a different approach to the emotional intelligence, starting with what I call the emotional presence. We see that to reach a certain level of emotional awareness, because at the end, when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about emotional awareness, we talk about emotional literacy, and we talk about
emotional regulation, really.
Emotional regulation. Some would call it emotional control. You and I would prefer regulation because it's more about regulating our emotions and our presence at the moment for the emotions. Adding to that, so now that I know my emotions, I am more aware about them. So am I emotionally intelligent? Well, I would say it depends.
At some things, it could be that your emotional intelligence in some areas of your life, but not others. It's not, it's not a global passport.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say, for me, emotional intelligence is not a certificate. It's not a curriculum that you go through and you say, okay, I am emotionally intelligent.
A life pursuit.
Exactly. It's a lifelong learning and lifelong presence, lifelong existence, I would say. So then what I do, once I develop this literacy, once I develop this awareness. So, and here where it comes, the second part of what I would like to talk about today, when I talk about emotional adaptability, it's how I can adapt this to my day-to-day life, to the different challenges that I may face, to the different achievements, accomplishments, and enjoyment. Because we take time to talk about challenges, we take less time to talk about successes, which we do the other way around here in PWT, because we talk about success all the time. So
success is another, and you and I love language. It's funny. English is not our first language. And I know for a fact that you and I both cherish the word, right? And really spend the time, because success, again, is a spectrum. And it's so tied up with that emotional regulation, emotional literacy, because, I remember reading this quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it was impactful. That said, the acceptance of a negative event is a positive event.
Absolutely.
Right? So success could be just coming to terms with your current circumstances. That is success. It may not be still the desired outcome, but the process
Absolutely. And
is where that emotional presence and that emotional, ability to adjust and adapt.
absolutely. This is where emotional adaptability, as I defined it, a blend of this emotional presence and an adaptability mindset. Because it's not enough to know my emotions, it's not enough to acknowledge my emotions, but then what I do with them, and what I activate in terms of action. And for me, it starts with really working on acknowledging first that moment of the emotion and how it translates to feelings, because feelings can last longer than the emotions. So
That's
then
right.
how it translates to feeling. And also the idea is that we might experience, and that happens often, multiple emotions at the same time.
That's right. In
So
conflicting emotions at the
conflicting
same
emotions, yeah, we hear
all
it,
of them
we
being
use
true.
the exactly, we use the expression on daily basis without even being aware of its meaning. Many of us would use, I have a mixed feeling about that. I on that situation gives me like a sweet, bittersweet
And we've
taste.
also learned to judge it, right? We hear
Yeah,
it a lot in media, like, oh, flip flop.
yeah,
Like you're
absolutely,
not allowed to change your mind. It's not
absolutely.
about changing the evidence to support your conviction, but it's changing your conviction based on the evidence in front of you. That
Yeah.
is maturity, emotional maturity.
Absolutely. And here where it comes my modality, which I call act twice, ACT twice, where the first act is acknowledge, choose, then transform.
That's right.
So that you transform yourself. The second act in act twice is align, cultivate, and thrive.
Mm,
And that circle of act twice, that's what combined together become what I call the emotional adaptability. And especially in the world we live in today. And we will continue living, because if it's not what's happening today at the global level, there will be another thing coming. And that's where the
it
adaptability
could be the
comes.
complete opposite,
Exactly. Exactly. So
right? Yeah.
not about just going on a linear or exponential direction and then something happens, something changed. So now what I want to do. So this is where emotional intelligence is not enough if it's not combined with real understanding of how to, as you mentioned, regulate our emotions, and then how to adapt even my not only my emotions, but how to adapt my actions, most importantly,
That's right. That's right.
and continue in what and who I want to be in the future.
You said something before we got too far from it and have to journey too far back. You said the word control. There's a
Absolutely.
little bit of a negative connotation when it comes to control, but here's the thing. We often tend to try to control the wrong things, opposite to controlling the right things. So here's an example. And you just mentioned it, right? In I to all of us who are self whatever diagnosed ADHD. The world is finally moving at our speed, right? But for a lot of people, the world is just changing so rapidly, and you have to react on your feet on the spot, especially when you're triggered. And what you just said, so you're triggered. There are things you can control. You can control stepping back and saying, you know what, I need time to like articulate, have agency. So it's there are a lot of skills, and there are a lot of things that you
Absolutely.
can skills that you can develop in order to excuse me, not to control. I don't know if control's the right word, to
It's
best
manage.
or to
It's
manage. Oh,
manage.
the
Yeah.
good word, to best manage the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And where the adaptability mindset comes in, because it's an ability, it's a skill. Adaptability, you learn to adapt. Most of us, and the people I work with, they learn to adapt the hard way by hitting the wall. So
And we keep doing it and doing it and the definition of insanity.
if you just think of the pandemic, I know that many don't want to go back there, but it is a reality, a clear example of adaptability, because many of us did things during the pandemic, during the lockdown, that we didn't think we could do or we want to do before
Could
that.
be done. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
With
simply
the
adapt.
pandemic, there's a little bit of a HR insight that says, for all those people in 2019 that were asked, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Right. The reality is that although we don't want to keep talking about it, but the pandemic did bring something to our consciousness.
Yeah,
That is the non-permanence that we assume that we are in a controlled environment where we really don't know.
yeah,
In we're really living not even one day at 1 minute at a time, right? And I think that is why that adaptability and so really is about what can you do to feel more confident and more prepared for
yeah.
sudden changes, especially when you're in leadership, especially when you're in entrepreneurship, which in my book is leadership.
Absolutely. Leadership has different.
Solopreneur.
Yeah. Leadership manifests in different contexts, and leadership, again, I know it sounds cliche, but it is cliche for a reason. Leadership, it's not a title. Leadership, it's not a position.
A mindset.
It's a mindset, exactly. And this is, and today we see it where just few years back, when you talk about anything related to emotion, it's seen as something soft, as something that it's not, that we
For
cannot
women,
relate to leadership, or
right?
something.
That is one aggressive, one microaggression towards women is to tell them, "Oh, you're being emotional."
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
really men can be as emotional as women. It just manifests differently.
It manifests differently, and how we are pressurized somehow by society to manifest it is, I would say, for women, it's natural to express their emotions. So we go to the expression spectrum of the emotional presence and the emotional awareness. And for men, we go to the other side, other extreme, which is the suppression. So we go from expression to suppression, which none of them is naturally.
Extreme is really,
Exactly. Eh,
not an ideal state.
And the adaptability comes in when we develop this skill to know and be emotionally at ease with deciding when to bend and when to bind, between
To bed and
with
then
different
find.
situations, when to decide to acknowledge that this is bitter or this is better.
Yeah.
So for me, and I use those two examples specifically of binding and bending and bitter and better, because the difference in letter is E and I, which constitutes emotional intelligence.
Oh, love it. Like I said, you got such a gift for word, right? For the word. And you know what I was thinking, especially when it comes to research and sciences. I've spent my entire life within humanities, right? Within human sciences. And especially when it comes to research, especially when it comes to, advanced degrees, is often seen as research of human science as being a pseudoscience, yet it is the very thing that keeps us, that keeps us human and that keeps us interacting with each other. right? Because one of the reasons, and it's both, it's two sides of the same coin, that automation is so precise, because you remove the emotion. A driverless car perhaps can drive better than humans, because there's not that emotional reaction or bias or whatever you want to call it. But on the same hand, it is the emotion that allows for the fluidity, allows the critical thinking, allows the instant interpretation. Not all things are equal, not all
Absolutely.
circumstances are equal. So when you say bitter, better, binding, bending, really, if you are in your true leadership, personal and in thought leadership, and just in being the better person, you're living in a constant state of gray,
Absolutely.
because it all depends on the context and the circumstances.
Exactly. And the example or the analogy that I like to use for this, because it express really, it gives an image to that. If we take in the past 2 decades, Japan has been like, as a country, really reimagining the building and the construction of their buildings to make
Oh, they are living in 2050,
exactly.
2075 compared to us.
And before that, we would say a solid building is one that has very solid foundations that nothing can shake them.
Yeah.
When Japan came out with the anti-seismic construction, so that the idea was not anymore how to have the solid stones, but how to have the buildings that can resist to the foundations being shaked. And that's really, I see it represents how we can deal with our emotions, and while at the same time adapting to the context, because it's not one way that we follow in whatever situation. And the Robert Pushnik's wheel of emotion expressed that in a really very nice way, where we can see clearly that different emotions can be combined for a single situation to form different feelings. The same way as different colors, if we combine them, will form a different shade. And being aware of that, so that it's not that like, oh, I know what are the emotions, and then I put a word to every single situation. Well, yes and no, because sometimes that word is not enough. I can be happy and sad at the same time, but then how I choose to act
Yeah.
accordingly to that. That's where
You
it.
do with it. I remember during one of our many workshops and trainings, there's an exercise that they draw a circle. They have a circle with wedges on divided by wedges, and you're asked. There's a statement that is said, right, and you're asked what is true about it. And you're like, okay, you say what you identify as being true. And then you're supposed to step one wedge to the left and say, what else is true? And one wedge to the left, what else is true? And
Right.
what is, and try to really gain a global perspective of what is happening, right, through more than one lens. And here's the thing, when you're in charge, be it your own business, your own team, your own life, your own family, when others are responsible, you are responsible for others, right? You are guidance somehow. It is imperative that you do invest time, money, effort, you know into growing your emotional range, your
Absolutely.
emotional literacy, your emotional adaptability. And this is where and we say especially men, but I have to disagree with that. I think emotional mental health is the spectrum. And there
Absolutely.
are people with they're trigger happy, both men and women at one end, people who, just don't know where to establish agency at the other end, right? For both men and women. And this is why it's so important, the work that we do collectively in
Absolutely.
trying to open the door to comprehension and understanding and empathy, which is
Yes.
the ultimate sign of emotional intelligence.
And
You're really
the
trying.
strength of what we are doing, the strength of what we are doing, Dr. Carolina, it's that we work to make it accessible and to make it knowledgeable before, as we were saying, people hit the wall.
Yeah.
I came to the field of emotional awareness and presence after 2 years of burnout and depression, and that's exactly what I want to avoid to the people we work with.
Excellent. So we're going to put a link to the Wheel of Emotion and to many other resources in contact. Of course, you can find Youssef, who is one of the most amazing mental health advocates that I have ever met. And he's in our magazines, A Powerful Man Today and Prosperous Living magazine. He's opening his own boutique accelerator. And of course, he has his private practice, but that lends itself to a different type of social learning. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your open mind, heart, and spirit towards learning more about your emotional mental health and wellness. Thank you. Until
Thank you.
next time.